to talk to you about the professor's house and an article I read related to that. Anne Baker's Terrible Women, Gender, Platonism, and Christianity in Willa Cather's The Professor's House. So I do want to say, starting off, that this is a good article. I agree with a lot of the things she says. And so at the end, I'll be kind of furthering the argument. So first, I'll give you a summary and kind of a framing quote to think about. So Baker focuses a lot on Augusta, and basically says that Augusta is kind of key to life. She obviously gives life to St. Peter at the very end of the novel. She literally saves him from asphyxiation at the end. She also gives him meaning and purpose and a sense of kind of playfulness earlier on in the novel. She kind of creates, or Baker is arguing that Augusta is merging opposing forces of things like gender, opposing forces even of religion. And through her ability to navigate this world of connecting opposing forces, she is then a redeemer and she provides truth. Her gender, of course, is mostly female, but Baker's arguing she's androgynous. She exemplifies traits of female femininity and masculinity. She's able to navigate the world of the old house by going up and down the stairs. She's able to go upstairs and communicate and work alongside St. Peter, as well as go downstairs and navigate the world of the women as well. Baker argues that there's a reconciliation of the opposing forces through Augusta. So she comes together and is able to merge different gender roles and also kind of bring together this idea of Platonic idealism and Christianity in one place. A framing quote is, like Augusta, Cather's art seeks to tie together representational strands that at first glance might seem incongruous. Our primary task as readers of The Professor's House is to see the connections between big ideas and small, mundane events. So Baker's arguing more than just Augusta bringing opposing forces into convergence to create this redemptive atmosphere, but that Cather's art itself, the novel itself, tries to bring ideas that might seem inconsistent, and even the structure, if we think of the narrative structure, the beginning and the end follow a more traditional way of constructing a narrative, and then the Tom Outland section is very different. So maybe that is purposeful. The textual connection that I want to make is on page 82. It's the Christmas Day scene. It reveals even further Augusta's significance for St. Peter's ultimate redemption. Their conversation right after Mass is really significant. Augusta is essentially teaching St. Peter. She's asking him if he's going back to the house, and he says, yes. And then, she's basically telling him about, he's asking her a question about the Magnificat, the Virgin Mary's prayer, and Augusta is kind of scandalized. On page 83, she said, the text says, Augusta stopped and looked at him. Why, Professor, did you receive no religious instruction at all? How could I, Augusta? My mother was a Methodist. There was no Catholic church in our town in Kansas, and I guess my father forgot his religion. That happens in mixed marriages, Augusta spoke meaningly. So Augusta is able to navigate and even reconcile this idea that, of course, St. Peter is conflicted. He never really had consistent, even religious upbringing. He had a history of Catholic roots, but he tells her, how could I have? My father forgot his religion. My mother was Methodist. And Augusta is able to understand that. And then she's still able to explain what the Magnificat was. And he asks her more questions, and they kind of have a conversation that way. So it's this idea of Augusta kind of having maybe some answers that St. Peter is looking for right away. Baker, though, her main points are of the Platonic ideals and Platonic nostalgia, Christian connections, illusions, exploration of gender through character analysis, connection through Augusta as redeemer for the conflict between ideals and perfect forms versus reality in its imperfections, and then art is transformative. So the Platonic ideals, of course, references the allegory of the cave and the idea that we can't actually see reality. What we see inside the cave is, of course, just a shadow, and that is what happens to Saint Peter as he's up in his attic. This Baker does mention this is not a new argument, but she is adding to that idea by saying Augusta connects Platonic ideals with Christian influences and connections, as well as merging masculinity and femininity. So she's saying Augusta plays a really, really significant role, and she's bringing four different forces together. The idea of Platonic ideals comes into play. Baker gives several examples where St. Peter is reminiscing on his life, where he is inspired to write his 8 novels of the Spanish exploration of North America. So he's idealizing this moment where he kind of almost had divine inspiration, if you will, when he's on a boat traveling with all males with him. He's living a life where he feels more free. He's excited to be doing his work. This is before he's tied down and he's married. So this idea is really important. And then there are, of course, many other examples Baker gives. Moving into the Christian connection section, Baker gives many examples of how Christianity is connected to this idea of idealism as well. So she talks about when Tom Outland is on the mesa at the Cliff Village, Cliff City, there is basically a mummified remains of a woman there they name Mother Eve. And that's significant because when Tom is essentially betrayed, it is supposed to imply the fall of the Garden of Eden. And Baker is saying that these ideas are all connected and that there is one person that can make them meaningful or important or reconciling all of these differences, and essentially that's through her faith, which is Augusta. The exploration of gender is also present. We have this idea that, as I mentioned, Augusta can navigate both worlds of femininity and masculinity. Another specific textual example that Baker gives is Augusta is not good with money. And so it's interesting because many of the women are concerned with money in the novel. Kathleen is jealous of her sister Rosamond. Godfrey's wife is concerned with money, and she really likes that Louis has come across money. He's able to take them to France. But Augusta doesn't really care. And also, she is more focused on living piously, living according to her faith and rituals in the Catholic Church. She isn't concerned with petty things like wearing wigs. She mentions in the very beginning of the novel, she has a conversation with the professor about how women are wearing false hair. She's not concerned with the materialism of the world that this novel does associate with women. And then Baker's final key point is that art is transformative, and this is really important. She says that art is created when Augusta is sewing the dresses. She's focused on the act of creation. St. Peter is focused on the act of writing. That is art as well. And the transformation is also important for the novel because the novel itself is an art form. And what Baker's really saying is that contrary to many feminist readings of the novel, which many critics will give it a negative review of the way that it portrays women in a negative light, actually, it's really important to remember that the novel itself is transformative because it's an art piece that was created by a woman. I wanted to say again, I do agree with most of Baker's claims, but the essay does not give enough depth to the outline section and how it might serve as a contrast to the predictably narrative frame of the novel. So, really, just furthering the argument, perhaps Cather asks us to re see how we view texts themselves and their transformative powers. Like a quote I wanted to um, highlight is, like Augusta, Cather's art seeks to tie together representational strands that at first glance might seem incongruous. Our primary task as readers of The Professor's House is to see the connections between big ideas and small mundane events. So I mentioned that before, but I think it's really important to end on that quote to make that connection between my question. What other connections do you see between big and small ideas? What is the significance there? And something that Baker doesn't really mention, it doesn't specifically relate to the feminist reading of the text, but I am really interested in this question. What is the significance of the natural world and the Platonic ideals forms? And my third question is, why do you think Tom Outland's more unconventional life takes him to a place high in an open space, the Mesa, where he feels free and closer to the essential truths of life, versus the professor, who lives a more conventional life that only takes him up into an old attic when he considers the essential truths of life as he retreats from the world below? So basically, Tom Outland is free to experience life and to possibly touch base with a higher power in an outdoor space, and then the professor is kind of confined, of course, in his cave, his attic cave. He's trying to seek inspiration, but he is kind of restricted, and in a way he's hiding, whereas Tom isn't hiding. He's free to be able to live the way that he wants to live. Thank you for listening, and I look forward